Hey guys, what's up? This is Tom Fountainhead here, coming at you for a brand new episode of my mixing tricks. And this time I'm going to take you through what I think is one of my strongest mixes ever. And I'm going to show you a couple of really cool techniques and approaches to layering a shit ton of tracks, but to still come out with a tight and focused mix. So the mixing session we're looking at is for the track called Kitchener. The band is called Peter Geltard Trio. And this is off their upcoming new album, Legit, which I think is going to be out in August 2017. And this is the chorus section of the tune. Hope you dig it. Alright, now let me play the same part without any layering. So from the very beginning of production, the plan for this particular part had been to experiment, to do lots of overdubs, to record different parts, different versions, different instruments, and then take all of these to the mixing stage and see what would be the best approach, of what combination of what element would make the sound, make the part sound the best. But then when I got all of these different versions and put them into Cubase, I just thought that I would be able to make this particular part sound extremely grand and beautiful. And I thought it should be a defining moment on the entire album. And also it's one of the things I enjoy doing most in mixing. So I took it as a challenge and ended up using all of these tracks at the same time. Okay, so all of that being said, let me walk you through the different elements and layers we've got going on in this mix. And let's start with the drums. So we have two different drum layers going on at the same time. The first one is this red one here, and the other one being yellow down here. So this is number one. Okay, and on to number two. So usually when you have more than one drum element going on in the same mix, it's going to be either a drummer playing to a loop or two different drummers and two different kids playing similar parts, sort of like a Melvin's thing. And in this case, however, the illusion I wanted to create was one of a superhuman drummer with four hands playing on an insanely large kit. And to create that, I had to combine these two drum takes in a way that they would create as little friction between them as possible. So I had to prioritize. I prioritized one kick drum and one snare. So I took out the kick drum from take one, but kept the snare in take one. And on take two, I kept the kick drum and took out the snare, except for this very important introductory fill right here. And in the cymbal department, even though the right wasn't being played, I tried to prioritize a microphone for this one here. So the microphone for the right on take one made the cut, while the microphone for the right on take two didn't. And then I also took out the room microphone from each part, simply because I envisioned it to be very dry very in your face, the whole part, and also because the more room information I had from the two of them combined, the more cluttered it appeared. So the best effect I got when they were very dry, very in your face, and no room mics being engaged. Instead, I used this drum crunch microphone here for take 2. So that's kind of like a SM57 placed in the middle of the drum kit, recording kick drum and snare and cymbals in equal measure. And then you mix that into your mix, as you can see, with kind of a very low volume. And you distort and compress the shit out of it, and it gives you this energy boost. It just makes everything more exciting and more real, and that's what I'm using here to push it towards the listener. And I also added a kick drum sample, which may be an uncommon thing in kind of a jazz rock mix like this, but I just needed a bit more control of the dynamics of the kick drum for this part, and also added in a little bit of high end in the sample, so it would cut through the mix better with so many different elements going on at the same time. So now let's check out these two elements combined. Beautiful. And as I said, I want to make this whole thing as big as possible. What we're talking about here is size, meaning width, depth, and height. Now, I think it's already pretty wide. Even with just the drums, it's already wider than your average drum mix. And then in terms of width, I don't think we need to worry about that either, because the very upfront and in-your-face drums combined with the more ambient, roomy tracks we've got coming up will create the depth we're looking for. What about height though? I think the bottom end is already covered because we've got the kick drum and we've got this massive floor tom, which I spent a lot of time fine tuning. And what I'm missing at this point is a lot of sparkly and shiny high end. So for that purpose, I'm bringing in these two percussion tracks here. First of all, we have a shaker, totally old school thing to do, and sounds like this. And it's got to be panned to the left side, because on the right side we already have the hi-hat. Here's shaker and hi-hat combined. That would totally not work if these two tracks would be panned to the same side or just too close to each other, because they would be fighting for space. And here's where it gets interesting. This track called Kreisel, which according to Google translates to gyroscope, sounds like this. So that's kind of weird and obnoxious, and I think it's just something that Peter, the guitar player, had lying around in his home studio and just recorded on a whim, so maybe it could be used. And boy, did I use it, because it triggered an idea in my head. I'm a huge fan of Einstürzende Neubauten, which is one of the most legendary and important industrial bands of all time. And they're infamous for using metal objects on stage to create sound. One of them being a rotating turbine. And when you hit the turbine with the drumstick while it's rotating, then it creates this sustainy, sparkly high sound. And so I was trying to recreate that specific sound based on this track. And let me show you what I did really quick. So first of all, I've got the crystallizer, and it's pitched to a certain frequency that kind of matches that Einstürzende Neubauten sound. And it's also a stereo delay mixed higher than the dry track, so it creates a very nice stereo effect. And then there's an annoying frequency around 2K that took out and lots of other things in EQ terms to make it fit into the mix as good as possible. A little bit of parallel compression. Reverb. And I'm using a specific reverb that not only puts it into a virtual room, but also makes it even wider so it won't interfere with the drums. And last but not least, we have the proximity, which is a super easy to use plugin if you really quickly want to move elements towards the listener or away from the listener with just one fader move. Okay, cool. Now let's combine our two drum takes with the percussion instruments, and I'm gonna play you everything we've got now and mute and unmute the percussion instruments every couple of seconds so you can hear the difference they actually make in the mix. Next up, we have the bass, which is green here in my session. And for sonic continuity, I decided to treat it exactly like everywhere else on the album, which is a combination between a DI signal and two microphones. So this is what it sounds like. One of the cool things that these guys did in the studio was to record an alternate version of the same bass track played with a bow, which is down here. And the problem is that we've already got so much low end coming from the main bass track, which is up here, and the kick drum and the floor tom and so on. So there's absolutely no way I can bring in another bass track into this mix, especially not in the middle of the stereo field. So what I ended up doing was to bring this new bass track into the mix as if it was a double-tracked rhythm guitar. Because we have two different mics, and I panned one hard left and one hard right. And then I set up an EQ track. So except for these frequencies here, which are the same on both tracks, you can see that these EQ curves are almost mirror images of each other. So I'm trying to get them to sound differently. And that helps a lot to prevent them from summing to mono. And the other really important thing is that I'm delaying one of the tracks, one of the microphones, by a couple of milliseconds. And that really gives you this fake stereo effect. Pretty cool, huh? And now let's check out the whole thing, meaning our two drum takes, the percussion, and our two different versions of the bass. So finally we get to the blues section, which is my favorite because it's the guitar section. And this guy here in the middle, this is Peter's main guitar, so it's the backbone of the whole operation. And just like we layered the main bass with the bowed bass on the sides, I wanted to do a similar thing here in the guitar section. So I copied Peter's guitar to another track, which is this one, And then I ran the crystallizer plugin, which creates a reverse stereo delay, which I then widen up with the S1 imager, and I use the FabFilter Pro Q again to make it fit in the mix. And listen to this new ambient track that I created together with the bowed bass, because they are both happening on the extremes of the stereo spectrum. So that worked great, just like I imagined. The problem was when I sent Peter the first mix, the first draft, he rightfully said, it sounds really good, but I'm beginning to lose track of what the guitar is actually playing. I can't really hear the details. And to solve that problem, I brought in another guitar track, which is this one. And it is a reamped version of the original take with more distortion and compression added. And I gave it even more distortion and compression, and I pushed a ton of high end. So this is what it sounds like on its own. So it doesn't really sound pleasant on its own, does it? However, if I play you the entire mix again, and I will gradually bring up this track from 0, what will happen is that the more I push up the fader, the more you will be able to, again, to hear the details of Peter's guitar performance. And in the context of all these different tracks going on at the same time, I guarantee you won't be able to hear the distortion and grid on this particular track. So here is the full mix once again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you enjoyed the music in this example, please check out the Peter Gelthardt Trio. It should be on Bandcamp soon, and I'll include the link in the description below. And also, if you're thinking of working with me as a mixing or mastering engineer for one of your projects, just get in touch through either of the social media pages that I will be linking to in the description. For now, I'm signing off. Have a great day.